Iowa's Keegan Murray is in the middle of a big breakout season for the Hawkeyes, but what will his role in the NBA look like? This is Floor and Ceiling. Let's break him down. Keegan Murray broke out in a big way this season for Iowa. Murray scored just 7 points per game as a freshman, but has more than tripled that in his second year for the Hawkeyes. At 6'8", with a 6'11" wingspan and a strong frame, Murray profiles as a tweener in the front court. But how does his mix of skills pair up against his improvement areas? Let's start out down low with Keegan Murray in the post or similar situations. The first thing I like about Murray's game is that he is a walking mismatch. He has the size of a wing but the physicality of a center. So if you're a wing, Murray will overpower you. If you're a big, he's too quick for you. More on that later, but for now, you can clearly see Murray's way of racking up easy points down low. He can operate out of a few dribbles and has good footwork and body control to get to his spots. Murray is shooting a monster 76% at the rim on high volume. Of his 98 makes, less than half were assisted. Seeing as how around half of Murray's shots are at the rim, those are really impressive numbers. Murray has had absolutely no problems taking over the spot Luka Garza left when he went to the NBA. But on the court, he gets to his spots using a combination of footwork, like seen with his spins, and strength. If he's not scoring, then Murray is shooting free throws. He gets to the charity stripe once for every 3 shots, and then converts his free throws at 78%. But although Murray can definitely create for himself at the basket, I think he also benefits from the game being played simple. To be fair, I don't think this Iowa team is stacked with playmakers. Murray is also the only guy to play over 25 minutes a game, so it's tougher to develop chemistry. But when you spoon-feed Murray the ball and all he has to do is catch and finish, then he is very solid at this. I kinda like to think that Murray can do the basics of a center offensively, so that, plus his rim protection that I'll break down later, makes me think you can downsize with him on the floor. Long term, Murray could be a small ball 5. The Iowa sophomore is a good athlete who can run the floor hard and has the strength to seal early. Murray then gets into his defender, which makes it easier to turn him and finish. What I like about Murray is that he's intentional with every move, so when he rim runs and finishes, his good hands paired with his good footwork make Murray dangerous. On top of that, he's a little bit of a bully. Murray is physical at more than 220 pounds to move and finish through guys. And while his offense is more ground-based, Murray can get up to finish a lob or a dunk 100%. One thing that I think is very important to highlight about Keegan Murray is his jump and second jump ability. It will become more clear as the video goes on, but Murray can make up for some of his deficiencies in this way. He can just go back up and gather his mistake. Simply put, Murray can jump, come back down, and quickly go up again. I don't remember this being a standout skill for any prospect in the last few cycles besides Marvin Bagley III. I'm not sure Murray is as good as Bagley here, but he's pretty close. He can vacuum up rebounds and clean up with power at the rim. Watch him do that here, for instance. Overall, Murray is a pretty good rebounder. He racks up 8 boards per game, with 3 coming on the offensive end. Murray can position himself well and is tough and strong enough to compete in traffic down low. I say this in many of my videos, but securing offensive rebounds is a great way to give your team and yourself more chances to get on the scoreboard. Now let's get into how else Murray can score. As for threes, this is an area where he is reliant on others. 96% of Murray's threes are assisted. Murray does not have a super fast release, but I think he is mostly fine when he sets his feet. Right now, he is making 36% of his strays, but on an improvable sample size. In the short term, I see him as a pick and pop or trail 3 kind of guy. Yet, there have been some very intriguing flashes of Murray as a movement shooter. Like I've said, his footwork and ability to get around the floor is pretty advanced for his size. So if you can get to the point where a 6'8" guy is coming off pin downs to drain threes, Murray's appeal goes way up. In terms of self-creation, I like Murray the most in grab-and-go scenarios. Murray mostly plays the 5 for Iowa in college, so he is in place to get the defensive rebound, and then Murray is nimble and fluid enough to bring up the ball himself. From there, Murray just makes good plays. He does not just bully his way to the rim. Murray has some shiftiness. He has float overs, rip-throughs, and timing. Here and there, he can also mix in a crossover. In other words, Murray is not just a straight-line driver who is unable of changing speeds or direction. He has a pretty good solid handle in the open court, at least good enough to get to where he wants. From there, Murray then shows good patience and craft, finishing at the rim with strength, length, and creativity. Murray has also flashed some ability to facilitate out of grab and goes. I will get into his playmaking for others shortly, but I like when Murray pushes the ball himself and keeps his head up. Murray is not a bad passer necessarily, so when he does take the time to scan the floor, he certainly has the poise and intelligence to make the right play. However, he will need to do this more often. Before we take a deeper dive into Murray's passing, let's look at how he can create for himself in the half court. Murray loves to operate out of that high right wing on the floor, and he's shown some impressive flashes. When Murray is facing up, we see how much of a mismatch he is. I think you can see shades of someone like Tobias Harris with the way that he moves outside in to get points or free throws. If you're big, Murray is quicker. If you're small, Murray is stronger. That is how he gets so many of his high percentage looks right at the rim. Murray has some creativity attacking from the perimeter. His handle gets him going to his spots, and he really likes driving left and then suddenly spinning right to put his defender in a bad predicament. Passing-wise, that's not really Murray's role for Iowa. He does not look to pass, but he has a 1-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio on nearly 32% usage. Considering Murray's volume, that's not bad at all. For now, Murray has not flashed anything too complicated, but he has shown that he can understand that other guys, especially his shooters, will be open when teams are doubling him or bringing defenders over to bother Murray. Eventually, you want to see his passing develop to the point where he can also punish mismatches as a facilitator. So far, I have not really seen that be the case. But for all of Murray's strengths, he also has some improvement areas, starting with creating for himself. Murray is definitely a solid ball handler in a few dribbles, but he is not particularly shaky with his handle. I also want to touch on the concept of quick twitch. It's not that Murray is a bad athlete. He's strong, has that second jump, etc., but he also has a certain loading time for all of those things. His movements are more powerful than explosive, so that can be a deterrent if his handle is also improvable. I'd also like to see Murray's release point on his shot go up a little. At 6'8" with a 6'11" wingspan, I feel like Murray should be able to get his shot up without being bothered most of the time. However, this does not always happen. And finally, Murray has to develop more moves. What happens when you take away that left drive to right spin? This has happened a few times, namely against Virginia. Murray did not respond to this setback in the best way, so I would definitely want to see his arsenal of moves keep growing. Another thing that Murray has struggled with at times is finishing in traffic. Sometimes this goes back to that lack of noteworthy vertical pop that I mentioned earlier. Murray is not quick enough off the floor sometimes. On the other hand, I also don't think Murray will face as much attention in the NBA. He is Iowa's first option, whereas I don't think he is necessarily going to be seen like that during his NBA career. Due to that, Murray will not face these sudden double or triple teams that anyone would struggle with when the other team focuses solely on them. At the same time, I also think this problem hints at Murray's passing. This might be nitpicky, and it is not necessarily bad that he is not making these passes, but I also think that someone who can process the floor more quickly would be able to, at times at least, kick the ball out and make another play happen. Finally, I don't fully buy into Murray's three-point shot. I know his percentage this season is pretty good, but Murray does not have the cleanest release and he can put too much strength on his jumper at times. In my opinion, Murray sort of lacks soft touch. Eventually, I think he'll make open threes at a solid clip in the NBA, but I'm not convinced about his shot right off the bat. He has a bit of a slower setup too, so defenders can still bother him right now. Also, Murray shot 30% from deep last year, which makes you question whether Murray has truly improved or if this is an outlier season. The place to start with Keegan Murray on defense is rim protection, where he is averaging a hair over 2 blocks per game for Iowa, and that is for good reason. However, I do want to stress that Murray is typically at his best when he is coming over, usually from the help side. He can hang back and guard the rim that way from time to time, but I think he's better as someone who can roam around a bit rather than having to stay and patrol the basket. Murray shines when he has time to track a play, not necessarily when he has to suddenly react. That goes back to how I think he is not someone who just explodes off the floor. When Murray can time himself, he has good verticality and alters shots at the rim without getting into foul trouble. Quickly, I also want to touch on Murray's anticipation. Again, it's about tracking plays and understanding where the ball is going to go. With his size and mobility, Murray gets a steal and a half per game that he then uses to make things happen for Iowa down the other end of the floor. To discuss Murray's perimeter defense, I'd like to use Iowa's game against Wisconsin. Murray had to switch out against one of the best scorers in the nation in Johnny Davis a few times, and I thought he did alright holding his own. Murray is not spectacular on the outside, but he can stay in front and move his feet okay. He's not super switchy, but Murray is not a plodding big. Like I'll get into, his performance switching can fluctuate a bit, but he is certainly capable when motivated. He manages to flip his hips and contest at least. Going into the NBA, I expect Murray will be asked to guard on the perimeter even more, but to be fair, he will also have to carry less of an offensive load. I'm confident that as long as Murray is not a total disaster, and I don't think he's going to be, he's okay enough to not be a negative on defense, and then make up for it down the other end of the floor. But make no mistake about it, Murray is going to have to keep improving as a defender on the outside. Murray usually will not get punished at the college level because he is big and skilled enough to kind of recover, but he will pay in the NBA. His lateral mobility is improvable for sure, and Murray also cannot really backpedal quickly enough to stay with drives or easily recover in the pick and roll sometimes. Overall, Murray will have to get more comfortable defending on the ball. I get the feeling that he would much rather play off the ball right now, and that is indeed where he's best at, but stepping out and switching is something fundamental to teams in today's NBA. Finally, the lack of quick twitch athleticism that I have mentioned throughout this video can also hinder Murray as a rim protector. Like I've been saying, he is good when he can track and time, but if you explode right at the rim, that is where he struggles a bit more. Generally, Murray knows where to be, so I'm not super worried about this, but it's also true that he lacks the speed to just burst up into the air and get a block out of nowhere. Again, I want to make clear that I don't think this is a huge issue, but Murray will face better, stronger, bigger, and quicker athletes in the NBA. So first things first with Keegan Murray, the first thing, I love how productive he is. There's no game that you'll watch and you won't see him do things to impact stuff on both ends of the floor. Due to that, due to his mix of tools, I think he's got good size, good mobility. His length, it's a little lacking. He's 6'11" wingspan for being 6'8". He could be a little bit longer, but like I said in the video, I think he can make up with it with his timing and positioning sometimes. He's not the quickest athlete, which, as I'll get into shortly, does pose some limitations. But overall, I feel pretty confident in saying that Keegan Murray, when my big board comes out, I'm pretty sure he'll be a top 15 lock at least. Now, getting into his offensive profile, I think we have to touch on two things. Number one, the self-creation. So I think that can come out of face-ups, out of mid-post situations. In Iowa, he's mostly been operating from that right wing area out on the perimeter, but I think that can translate to mid-post face-up stuff in the NBA. And then obviously he can grab and go as well. This is where I really like Keegan Murray's game. He's fluid, he can legitimately handle the ball in the open court. I think this is something that will translate to the NBA, maybe not in year one per se, but I think pretty quickly. And from there, I love Murray's physicality. I love his willingness, get in the lane, off a crossover, a float over, a rip through, whatever the case is. He can move defenders with his strength. He can finish off the glass. I really like him. And now, offensively, the next step for him, I think, will be to really ensure that three-point shot is up to scratch. Because I think that Murray can pretty much do a bit of everything. If you ask him to create for himself in the post, like I said, he can do that in flashes. He can definitely catch and finish, be that in pick and roll scenarios, which I still want to see him play more out of. Or, if he runs, seals the floor hard, gets the ball, that double jump ability that I mentioned, he can quickly just go up and dunk the ball, finish, whatever the case is. So once he does all of those things and he adds that three-pointer on a more consistent basis, then I really think that Murray can become a guy that you can play in pick and roll, pick and pop, have him play against mismatches, and overall he gives you a lot of offensive options that not many prospects actually do. Defensively is where I have a few more questions about Keegan Murray. Now, I don't think he's bad on this end of the floor. Like, you don't watch him and you're like, oh, this is a disaster. Like, this guy can't stay on the floor. Obviously not. But I do think that how that translates over to the NBA will be interesting to follow. Already in college basketball, he can struggle sometimes dealing with, smaller, quicker guards, and the level of competition only goes up in the NBA. So if he's struggling sometimes at the NCAA level on switches or on staying in front on the perimeter, then how will he do against, Steph Curry, Bradley Beal, even like Jalen Green from last year's draft class, someone like that who's quicker, who's got that quick twitch explosiveness that Keegan Murray can sometimes lack. However, I think that where I like him the most is as a help side rim protector. Like I said in the video, you don't necessarily want him to be like a stationary 5 in that you keep him in the paint and he sort of patrols that area and guards the rim that way. I don't think his game is conducive to that. I don't think his athleticism, like I said, he can't get off the floor that quickly, so you don't necessarily want to put him in those situations. However, if you have him sort of in a place where he can track the play, where he can follow it and then react, then he can absolutely come up with some big blocks like we've seen this season at Iowa. So overall, I think that Murray has some question marks on defense. I buy the offensive package, although he does need some retooling, and I feel pretty confident in saying that Murray is going to be a lottery pick this upcoming 2022 NBA draft. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. Make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Keegan Murray, where you would take him, what you think he has to improve on. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, if you enjoyed the channel, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.